So you were in Syria for 4 days. Did you meet with President Bashar Al Assad? Did you have any compunctions about meeting with somebody like that, giving him any sort of enhanced credibility because a member of the United States Congress would meet with someone like that?
You met with President Bashar al-Assad in Damascus this past January, just a little while ago. Do you doubt, Congresswoman, that he's capable of launching a chemical attack on his own citizens? Because the Obama administration said he did it back several times in 2013. Why did you meet, Congresswoman, with President Bashar al-Assad? You know, you got a lot of criticism for going to Damascus and meeting with him. Why did you decide to meet with him? Who is responsible, Congresswoman, for the deaths of more than 400,000 Syrians, mostly civilians, and a lot of children, elderly? Who do you blame for those deaths over the past 6 years? But don't you believe that Bashar al-Assad bears a lot of the responsibility for the horrific deaths that have occurred in his own country, his regime, his military going out there and killing all these people? Don't you think, Congresswoman, he bears a lot of that responsibility? You met with the president. He was then the president-elect during the transition in New York, and then you went in January to meet with President Bashar al-Assad. Did you convey any message to Bashar al-Assad from President Trump during your meeting in Damascus? What was Bashar al-Assad's message to you, Congresswoman? Do you have any regrets about going? Because you faced a lot of criticism, as I pointed out, since then.
Well, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has an unlikely defender, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. At some personal risk, the Hawaii Democrat recently made a secret 7-day trip to Syria and Lebanon.
We'd be willing to meet with adversaries or potential adversaries, not just our friends.
Do you think Assad is our enemy?
If we're serious about the pursuit of peace.
Do you think Assad is our enemy? What do you say to Democratic voters who watched you go over there, and what do you say to military members who have been deployed repeatedly in Syria, pushing back against Assad?
But again, going back to Assad, Assad is not an enemy. Is he an adversary of the United States?
We have to look to who poses a threat to the United States and the American
I understand
people.
that, but there are a lot of people who don't pose a direct military threat to the United States who consider themselves to be adversaries of the United States. Vladimir Putin considers America to be an enemy. We consider Russia to be an adversary. I'm just asking, do you consider Assad to be an adversary of the United States?
When I look at...
So what would you say he is to the United States? If you cannot say that he's an adversary or an enemy, what is Assad to the U.S.? What is the word?
You can describe it however you want to describe it.
I want to know how you describe it.
My point is...
Are interests aligned with ours?
What are Assad's interests?
Assad seems interested in the slaughter primarily of his own people, in part. I mean, how does that line up? Survival, yes.
Exactly.
Well, he also
and he seems to be willing to go to great ends to do that.
He also uses weapons of mass destruction on his
adversary
as well.
I
mean, we can talk about all these things. My point here is...
Is it important to talk about these things? That he uses chemical weapons on his own people?
Of course, of course.
CNN political analyst Josh Rogan is a columnist for The Washington Post. Why do you think she's reluctant to condemn a brutal dictator? You know, she says she went to Syria to promote diplomacy. But, I mean, I know you just laid out some of it, but what was she really doing?
Congresswoman, first, thank you for your service, which is something I say to everyone who has served that comes on the show, and I think it's important. That being said, my understanding is you know how I feel about your stance on foreign policy, and when I hear the name Tulsi Gabbard, I think of an Assad apologist. I think of someone who comes back to the United States and is spouting propaganda from Syria. Thank you for your service, which is something I say to everyone who has served that comes on the show, and I think it's important. When I hear the name Tulsi Gabbard, I think of an Assad apologist.
Well, you're putting words in my mouth that I've never said.
You did not say that Syrian President Assad is not the enemy of the United States. Say it now, clarify.
The issue here is how can we help alleviate the suffering of people?
Just really one moment. Is he an enemy of the United States?
I want to ask you a specific question. In 2017, you visited Syria. You met with Bashar Al Assad. Recently, you were asked if he was a war criminal, and you couldn't really say. Can you say it tonight?
That's why I'm running for president. And that's what I will do as president, is end these regime change wars.
You served 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. You're a major in the Army National Guard. But there are people inside the U.S. military, many of them, and inside the U.S. intelligence agencies that believe that Assad was behind the gassing of his own people. You just don't buy that.
You know, listen, I think that this coming from someone who has been an apologist for an individual, Assad, who has murdered the people of his country like cockroaches. She who has embraced and been an apologist for him in a way that she refuses to call him a war criminal. I can only take what she says in her opinion so seriously. And so I'm prepared to move on.
The only thing really she said about you is she said that you were essentially an apologist for Bashar Al Assad, that you would never criticize him as a dictator or a murderer. If voters are wondering what is your take on Bashar Al Assad, what do you say? Do you consider him a torturer or a murderer?
That's not what this is about. I don't defend or apologize or have anything to do with what he has done to his own people.
But if you're president of the United States, it's fine if you want to meet with somebody, but there's traditionally a role of the president of the United States calling out human rights abuses overseas. Bashar al-Assad is head of a regime which has disappeared many people. I hadn't planned to go down this road, but I understand the not wanting to get involved militarily, and certainly as a veteran, you have more of a right than anybody to talk about that and have an opinion about it. Just on a factual basis, Bashar al-Assad is a murderer and a torturer. Do you not agree with that?
The most Googled candidate during the second CNN debate. It's also made Gabbard a target herself. Let's bring in the Hawaii Congresswoman. Good to have you on Primetime.
Aloha, Chris. Good to talk to you.
Good to see you. So I want to talk to you about how you took and why you seemed obviously dissatisfied with the senator's answers last night, what you think the state of play is after last night for you and the other Democrats. But I want to clear something up. You need to acknowledge that Bashar al-Assad is a murderous despot, and you can still make your argument that the United States has no business risking blood and treasure in places where it should not be. I don't understand why you didn't give that answer last night. Do not make any other assumption about anything. I'm talking about one specific thing. All of that is completely valid and does not need any benefit to Bashar al-Assad. On your website, I don't understand why you have information on there that questions the notion that Assad is responsible for things that the U.S. intel and the United Nations intel believe he's responsible for. You don't need to defend him to make your argument. I don't understand why you do.
I've never defended Assad.
The stuff on the website questions the legitimacy of his connection to the attacks.
Congresswoman, do you not believe that the same could be said for your meeting with Bashar al-Assad?
I don't know how you could equate that. We're talking about a president that is directly...
That you would be meeting with the leader of Syria who could feasibly be responsible for the killings of over 500,000 people, who ordered the chemical attacks on children in his own country?
Working with people who do things that we find abhorrent.
Or meeting with Bashar al-Assad, but not necessarily meeting with the leader of Saudi Arabia or supporting... Or having a relationship with them.
Talking about having a meeting.
I don't think I'm mixing two different things up. I'm just trying to get clarity on it because there seems to be some inconsistencies in your views of it.
There's no inconsistency whatsoever, and that's caused millions more to suffer.
So I hear you.
So you're talking about two very different things here. But you know what? These
I hear you on
this,
Congresswoman. I hear you on this. I hear you on this. So I want to go with this for a moment. So when sitting down with someone like Bashar al-Assad in Syria, do you confront him directly and say, why do you order chemical attacks on your own people? Why do you cause the killings of over 500,000 people in your country?
Look, you know, I want to break this down to what we're talking about. I want to break this down to what we're talking about here today, because you're talking about a meeting that took place, what, 3 years ago?
Well, Congresswoman,
and every time I come back, here on MSNBC, you guys talk to me about these issues. It sounds like these are talking points that Kamala Harris and her campaign are feeding you because she's refusing to address the questions that were posed to her.
Congresswoman, it's important, I think, for the American people to have context about your foreign policy issues and where you stand. If you're leading with foreign policy and you're running for the President of the United States, a meeting with Bashar al-Assad, which I'm sure you understand, is a very controversial meeting to take. Hence the reason why, when you come on MSNBC, it is important for us to talk to you about that. And of course, every anchor has a different perspective and different questions to ask of you.
Every single time for 3 years. This is where the propaganda comes in, because I've talked about this a lot for the last 3 years.